Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Gabe Cohen. I'm the Senior Director of Marketing Communications here at GuideStar, and welcome to today's webinar called Giving Season is Coming. I should say, I guess, ominously called Giving Season is Coming. We're excited that you're able to join us for this interactive conversation. We're happy to have the folks from Classy joining us today, and we're going to talk a bit about getting ready for Giving Season and for Giving Tuesday. Before we get started, just a few housekeeping items. The first thing is that this is an interactive webinar. We're going to save hopefully about 15 or 20 minutes at the end of the webinar today for questions, but you can ask us questions at any point during the webinar. So just use the questions pane that you can see probably on the right-hand side of your screen, but it's on the left-hand side of the presentation, and ask questions at any point today. We'll sift through them and ask the best ones at the end. And to answer the question that we're no doubt going to get probably 100 times, we are recording this webinar and it will get emailed out to you. So thanks, everybody. Joining me today for the webinar is Barrett Frankel. Barrett is a lead account manager at Classy.org, and she works with Classy's nonprofit partner organizations to help them tell compelling stories, identify and engage their base of support, execute robust fundraising campaigns, and raise essential dollars. In addition to her extensive nonprofit communications and fundraising experience, Barrett is a trained public speaker and storyteller. Barrett holds a number of different degrees from Lehigh University, including a Master's of Education and a BA and BS. Also joining me today is my colleague out on the West Coast, Nico, and Eva is our Senior Director of Programs here at GuideStar. She's GuideStar's in-house expert on nonprofit strategy and evaluation issues. Eva's goals are to help nonprofits share their full story using their GuideStar nonprofit profiles and to use that information to help make better decisions. She has over 12 years of experience in strategic planning and evaluation in the social sector, and having worked in complex social issues in health, education, and community vitality. Eva has a BS in physics from the University of Notre Dame and a PhD in physics from Oxford University. We'll save the physics talk for another day, though, I think, Eva. Before I turn it over to Barrett, I just want to do a bit of scene setting for us, and I'm going to start today by asking a poll question. So go ahead and answer when you get a chance. How much does your organization raise during December? A lot less than a typical month, a little less than a typical month, the same as a typical month, or a little more than a typical month, or a lot more than a typical month. And just we're going to wait for the results to come in here. Bear with us. Great. So I'm going to go ahead and share those results with everybody. And not surprisingly, a lot more than a typical month. And that's exactly what the data shows. So let's hop over to that now. Sorry, bear with me one second, guys. All right, great. So that's exactly what the data says. About 30% of online donations for the entire year come during that final month of December, which is just a huge proportion of donations. And it's not just that entire month, but it's also those final 3 days. About 11% of online donations last year came in those final 3 days of December. So that's why we're here. And if we look just at Giving Tuesday, there is a huge number of donations that are coming in, and it just keeps growing and growing. And who knows what 2017 is going to bring us for Giving Tuesday. But I would put out there that I think that we're probably going to raise over $200 million as a sector just on that one day, coming up here not too long from now. So let's ask another poll here, and we're curious to get your thoughts as to what are your biggest challenges during giving season. So telling your story effectively, motivating others to advocate for us, dealing with lots of social media channels and choices, or having too much time and too much to do. Great, in just 1 second here. Excellent. So let's go ahead and take a look at those results. So it looks like there's kind of a variety of different issues that people face, but one of them is that it's having too little time and too much to do. That's the number one, and not surprisingly, there's a lot to do to get ready. And that's why we wanted to have this webinar so early this year. We wanted to make sure that we were giving you guys this information early enough that you can implement everything that you need. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it, I'm going to talk through our agenda first, and then I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Barrett. So Barrett, in just a minute here, is going to talk about that preparation that we were just speaking of. How can you make the most of your time between now and the start of giving season? And then Eva's going to talk for a bit about how you can get your GuideStar nonprofit profile looking great leading up to the giving season. And lastly, as I said, we're going to save time for questions and answers toward the end. So with that, Barrett, the floor is yours.
Thanks so much, Gabe. Really appreciate it. And welcome, everybody. Happy giving season. It is upon us. Just give me a second here to get control over the screen. All right. So Gabe covered this and when he first started out, table of contents, what's on the agenda. I'm really going to go a bit more in depth into the planning, execution, and follow-up of your Dream Giving Season campaign. It is August, and I know that sounds like it's really early to start thinking about the end of the year, but we all know in the nonprofit world that it gets here faster than we can imagine. I'm not even sure what happened to June and July. So we really want to focus on starting the planning now. I'm also going to do a bit of a deep dive into storytelling and also show some of our favorite giving campaigns from past giving seasons. All right, to begin with, let's dive into planning. As I said, it is August, but start planning now. I think you're taking a great first step in just being on this webinar or watching this webinar recording. It really is never too early. So what I want you to really start thinking about is think like a for-profit, which sounds so weird to those of you who have never worked for a for-profit. I spent my entire career prior to coming to Classy in the nonprofit space, so it took me a little bit of time to understand this concept. But think about all of the work that for-profit stores put in to lure in customers for their big days. Think about those big box stores like Macy's and Best Buy, Walmart, how they start advertising well in advance of those Hallmark dates that are coming around the corner. They tease out the specials. They create excitement for Black Friday. Amazon does it really well for Cyber Monday. The same can and should be done for not only Giving Tuesday, but your entire giving season, so that lead up to those final 3 months of the year. Think about how you can start generating buzz and start early recruiting your biggest advocates. Who are those advocates, you might ask? Think about your board members. Think about your power fundraisers, social media evangelists who are interacting with you on Facebook and on Twitter. And who are those passionate volunteers who maybe can't give a monetary donation, but they're certainly willing to give their time and energy? Think about how you can engage all of these people to reach out and really generate some buzz around your end of year campaign. Also think about Hallmark dates. We're really lucky in that we have a jam-packed calendar starting in November. Some key dates that you can really use to springboard your campaign. So we have Thanksgiving kicking things off on November 23rd. And what I like to use Thanksgiving as is really just giving thanks to your donors, to your supporters, to those volunteers. It's really warming them up for what is to come in terms of all of the asks and all of the emails that are going to be forthcoming over the course of the next few weeks leading up to the end of the year. You have Black Friday, Cyber Monday, followed right thereafter with Giving Tuesday on November 28th, and then of course the last day of the year, December 31st. I also want to remind you that if you are a religiously affiliated organization or you have a core group of supporters that are quite religious, you can certainly integrate some of those Hallmark dates, Hanukkah, Christmas, Kwanzaa, etc., into your appeals and into your planning stage. One of the biggest questions and most often received questions that we get here at Classy is, how do we integrate our offline campaigns with an online campaign? And I really want you to stop thinking of them as separate and distinct. Remember that you should maintain cohesive messaging and branding from your website all the way through to your direct mail piece if you're sending a snail mail, appeal letter, or end of year letter. Think about how that can also be integrated into your online campaign, email appeals, social media posts. A way I like to sort of paint this picture is imagine that you have a spider web, and at the center of that web, you have your core campaign narrative with various components that branch out from that central point. Your call to action should remain consistent across all of those channels. And what you enter into your direct mail piece, you can take a chunk of that, repeat it on that online campaign, then tease it out over a course of several different emails, which creates your story arc, which is that next bullet point. And I want you to remember with this story arc, with your email appeals and social media posts, to make sure that your asks are donor-centric. I think something that a lot of organizations do really well is talk about themselves, but a difficulty that they have when they're writing appeals is that they focus the language on themselves instead of on the language of their supporters. So we always say use the you language. You make this possible. You are sending these children to school. You are saving these lives, whatever it might be that connects them to your mission and to your cause. And remember that every good story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. An effective campaign is really no different. So think about, as you're planning, how you're going to introduce your campaign, then how you're going to launch it, and keep that emotional appeal and storytelling moving throughout the months of November and December, and then create that sense of urgency as you're working towards the end of the story, which is the end of the year in this case. Also think that we often overlook historical data. Now, for those of you new to the nonprofit world, you may not have any historical data to look at, but think about it in terms of what do you want to start gathering this year that you can then look upon next year. So for those of you who have been in the business for a while, or you have that historical data, think about what emails have performed well in the past. Conversely, which did not. Don't just look at the number of people who have opened different messages, what those subject lines contained, whether a video or an image was compelling, but I want you to also look through click-through rates and conversion rates. It is one thing to get someone to open your email. It is another thing to actually get them to transact. Also take a look at your daily cash receipts over the past years and over that end of year or 3-month period to really gain some insight into the habits of your community of donors. I also want you to take some time. August is a great time as we're gearing up for this, and look back in your inbox, see what others sent you last year. I'm always telling organizations we work with, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. So look through those emails, think about what caught your eye, what messages were compelling, and motivated you to perhaps even give at an end of year time. Think about how you can incorporate those into your own communications. And the last thing I want you to think about is look at your Giving Tuesday donors from last year and understand their persona. Are they new donors? Did you attract them by having a Giving Tuesday campaign? Did those donors also give at the end of the year? And just sort of start to understand who your community is. So now that you have a solid plan in place, it is time to execute that. So in addition to having a platform and a way to accept donations, such as classy.org, you need to have a solid communication plan. Something that my team here hears me say time and time again is there has to be a marriage between fundraising and communications. So think about it in this way. Your supporters' inboxes is going to be inundated with emails during the last stretch of the year. Yours will be as well. So how can you make sure that your emails are cutting through that noise? And if there's one tip I have for year-end emails, it is to personalize your asks. I'm going to jump down actually to that third bullet point here and dive into segmentation a bit, because I think that goes into the personalization. But if the end goal is that your marketing emails reach and engage your supporters, I think you need to start thinking about how can you do this? How can you do it effectively as well as efficiently? I know some of you are a one-person team. We are always strapped for time. You just showed that in Gabe's poll a few minutes ago. So I think no matter the time of year, people want to receive emails that are personally relevant to them with targeted messages, clear calls to action. So if you're thinking, where do I even begin to segment? I think a few ways you can go about it, and start simple. I'm by no means telling you to have 20 different versions of an email, but think about how you can segment your supporter base into volunteers versus those who are blog subscribers who have not yet donated. I think you can look at the last donation size, give a little bit of love and attention that is different to those higher value donors than those lower value donors. Also look at the frequency of donations that someone's giving. If they're a monthly donor, you should treat them a little bit different than those who are just those annual donors. If someone has donated some years, but not yet this year, some people call those SIBUNTs, as well as LIBUNTs, which is last year, but not yet this year. And I'm not saying come up with completely separate and distinct emails or direct mail pieces. What I'm simply saying is change out a line or two, insert an extra paragraph that's really telling your appeal specific to those people. So if you have some people who have dropped off the radar and they haven't donated maybe in 2 years, I think it's perfectly fine to say to them, we miss you. We need you back in our community. Same thing with the volunteers. You can certainly give them a shout out and say, thank you so much for volunteering your time. We are so appreciative of that. If you're able to give a monetary donation, here's what our ask is right now. Gabe touched upon this as well, that 30% of all charitable gifts are made in the last month of the year. And I know a conversation that I had nearly every year towards end of year when I was in the nonprofit space was, how many emails should we be sending? I want you to remember that 21% of all of December 2016 revenue was processed on the very last day of the year. And the average number of emails that an organization sent in the month of December was 9.8. There actually is a correlation between increased email volume and increased email revenue, and similarly a decreased volume that's shown a uniformly decrease in revenue. So if you're debating whether or not you should send one more email, if I was talking to you and advising you, I would say yes. Remember that if you don't ask, if you're not part of that conversation, someone else will be, and will be taking those dollars away from you. I also want you to think about how you can get creative to push through plateaus. The giving season essentially spans the months of November and December. Sometimes we can even add in October into that mix. So it's a really long time to have an ongoing, engaging campaign. So how can you bring matching gift partners, sponsors, or integrate incentives into the overall mix? And last year, actually, M&R actually featured a survey, and 73% of organizations integrated a dollar-for-dollar match or an incentive to give on Giving Tuesday. And that was up from just 38% in 2015. So if you're not doing a matching gift, somebody else is, and I am a sucker for matching gifts. If my $25 actually counts as $50, that's a win-win for me. It makes me feel extra good. I also want you to remember to give a direct call to action. This is no time to be shy and to say, oh, your support would really help us. Give a concrete dollar amount ask. Donors actually tend to respond to specific calls to action with defined results, much more so than they do the sort of willy-nilly gray area to asks. So if you can say something like, give $10 to fill a child's backpack with school supplies, it's a much stronger call to action than something that doesn't have those defined characteristics to it. I actually have a couple examples forthcoming in future slides if you're looking for a little bit of inspiration. And I want you to remember the importance of subject line. We all live in our inboxes all day long, but 33% of email recipients actually only open purely based off that subject line. So keep it short, keep it urgent, and keep it specific. Again, I'm going to go back and sort of beat the dead horse of analyzing data. Remember, though, that while you're executing your campaign, you can still make adjustments to your email initiatives. So, for instance, if a recipient hasn't opened 2 or 3 consecutive emails, you might want to hold off on sending them any more asks until the last 2 weeks of the year. You certainly don't want to risk them hitting unsubscribe for feeling harassed by continuing to flood them with messages. Once someone makes a donation, stop sending them appeals. I think this is something that is so easy to forget, but it is oh so important. You do not want to give the impression that you're not paying attention to their gift or that their gift is not meaningful to you. Something else that my team hears me say time and time again is that social media is not the end-all be-all. Social is a really great advocacy tool. It's a great marketing tool to announce your campaign, offer reasons to give, make specific asks, share milestones and updates, your 50% to your goal, or you reached, your first $1,000. But keep in mind that anywhere between 2 and 8% of your followers and fans see your posts on social media. So it is a really small percentage. Are there ways to boost that? There certainly are. If you want to invest some time and energy into digital ads, I definitely recommend that. Things like Google AdWords and Facebook ads can really zero in your targeted asks on a key group of your constituents. And last but not least, on the execution, 68% of emails are read on a mobile phone. So please, please, please ensure that your emails are optimized for smaller screens and are mobile responsive. And I'd even pull that thread a little bit further and encourage you to remember that it's so important to have a donation platform, an online platform that is mobile responsive. If your donor opens an email, clicks on donate, and then lands on a page that they have to keep scrolling into and magnifying in order to figure out how to enter their donation, you're just creating hurdles for them and you're actually losing out on valuable dollars. Now, it might seem silly that I have a thanks slide in here, but I think this is something, again, that is often overlooked. This is actually an organization that I worked with over the past year and a half, and I think it's a great example of a thank you email. This was actually sent after Giving Tuesday. It's personalized. It has an impact directly inserted in it. It gives that dollar amount raised as well as the percent to goal accomplishment. And this was their way of really tying in Giving Tuesday into their overall end of year strategy. They also have a great emotional component to it by including a quote. This can also be accomplished by including a video or a photo. I think it's so important to remember to draw a connection between a donor support and the actual impact. So deliver your thank you in a way that matches your cause. Remember that your thank you is just as important as your please. I think there's so much focus on that initial component of the campaign, which is that ask, that appeal. But it's so important to promptly thank your donors. So if you have donors coming in throughout the giving season, do not wait until January and February to thank them. Let them know that you really appreciate their support throughout that entire giving season. All right, let's get into some storytelling. I have a couple of examples for you. So this is a great example of outlining how a supporter's donation is going to help and what it will provide. So this is what I say is a not so tangible example of storytelling, where we're not connecting an exact dollar amount to an exact impact, but rather it's broader brushstrokes. It's saying that the donation is going to provide animals, income, a better future, sustainability. Still telling the story without diving too deep into what those specifics are. And since donors are more likely to give when contributing is personally meaningful to them, make sure that you're customizing your language so that they can connect supporting you and your cause with their core sense of who they are. They want to know that they can have a personally meaningful impact. Now, the next example is essentially the reverse. And this ties exact dollar amounts to those impacts. Now, something I do want to somewhat caution you against is make sure you check with your team on restricted giving rules that you have as an organization. You want to be careful with your language and make sure that you're telling someone that if they donate $10, that is going to go toward providing nutritious meals, that you have that back end accounting accounted for so that that restricted gift can be specific to that cause. I think there are some ways we certainly can go around this and use words like $10 would enable us to provide 11 nutritious meals. It's really just a matter of what you want to do from an organization standpoint. But as you can see here, this is what I almost call a menu of options that you're giving your donors, where you're giving them the opportunity to not only connect with a specific dollar amount, but with that specific impact as well. Some people are going to be drawn to certain impacts and others are going to be drawn to others. I want you to remember to contextualize the campaign. So this is something that Heifer did a few years ago, where they really created this infographic to tell their story, to tell their narrative. They conveyed the concept of an alternative gift in lieu of the more typical tangible merchandise that we so often give to our loved ones and friends and family. They even pulled in some really interesting data points. So things like 51.4% of shoppers bought clothing and accessories on Black Friday. That is a huge percentage. Their call to action to challenge that percentage is to give bigger, give more meaning, clothe an entire community, give sheep, give a gift basket. So tap into the power of meaningful gift giving. One of the other percentages and data points that I really appreciate in this is nearly 80% of Americans would rather have a charitable donation made in their honor than receive a gift they wouldn't use. Tap into that psychology of giving and that mindset in order to get people to start thinking about, oh gosh, yes, I can give a really meaningful gift to my brother by making a donation in his honor. I also want you to think about how you're telling your story, and this goes back into having that cohesive messaging and branding from your website through your direct mail pieces into your online campaign, and then pulling that even further into your email appeals and social media posts. This is another organization that I worked with directly here at Classy called Many Hopes, and something that they do really well, in addition to the planning and the execution, is they tell their story in really tangible ways and in bite-sized pieces. So these are actual examples of one, an email that I received from them, and then the integrated Facebook post along the same lines of the same campaign, where they're connecting their audience with the impact and helping them understand how the audience can truly help. So they're making the appeal an emotional one. Here, it's a really strong call to action. Send her to medical school. $10 a month does that. And you can see how they have that cohesive messaging strewn through the email as well as into their Facebook posts. So remember, it's so important to have that dotted line between all the various components that are supporting your online campaign and your overall end-of-year campaign. I just threw a lot at you. I hope you were furiously taking notes. If not, you'll get this recording. But here's a summary slide, essentially breaking it into the 3 key components that I think go into a solid campaign and certainly a solid end-of-year campaign strategy, and that is to plan, to execute, and to thank. And if you can't remember those 3 words, we here at Classy love a good acronym. So I'm going to make it easy for you, and it is PET. So you can think, what did Barrett tell me? PET. Okay, I need to plan, I need to execute, and I need to thank. It is the end of August. You have plenty of time. I don't want you to be overwhelmed by the task that is ahead of you. I think you can be really strategic about how you're going to enter into the planning phase and then pull that into the execution phase. And as always, do not forget to thank your donors, thank your supporters, thank those social media evangelists. And on that note, I will thank you for listening to me ramble for the past 20 minutes or so, and I'll turn this back over to Gabe.
Barrett, thanks so much. That was really great. The statistic that Heifer included, about 80% of Americans would rather get a charitable donation in their name than a gift. I'd never heard that before. That's quite impressive. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Nico. Eva, whenever you are ready.
Thank you, Gabe. And thank you, Barrett, for some really great do's and don'ts for your giving season campaign. I'm going to continue the theme of getting ready for giving season, and I'm going to make the case that one of the things that you should do in order to get ready is get your GuideStar profile in shape. And I hope that Rocky, pictured here, can teach us a few lessons about how to do that. So first of all, many of you know and love GuideStar, but for some of you, you might have some questions on your mind. For example, isn't GuideStar about tax forms? Isn't that where I get where I can see my tax forms or my donors can see them? You know, as an organization, I'm already on GuideStar. My name's up there. Is there anything else I need to do? And what does GuideStar have to do with giving season anyway? Well, I hope to answer all 3 of those questions. So first of all, if you haven't checked us out lately, there is a lot more than tax forms on GuideStar these days. These are our new updated nonprofit profiles. This version has been released just recently in August, where we've really updated the look and feel and some of the navigation for the profiles. But as you can see, they really tell a robust story about your organization. There's a summary with some key numbers. There's information about your programs and results. There's information about your financials, many of which do come from the tax form, but go beyond it. And there's information about your operations and the people that work at the nonprofit. The way I think about this is if Barrett helped you plan your campaign, sort of plan your trip, your tour through giving season, think of your GuideStar profile as a way of kind of packing your suitcase full of the important information that you will need to execute that campaign. All the ingredients that you will need to execute the campaign can be brought together by working on your GuideStar profile. So first of all, many of you know that when organizations, your profile on GuideStar is visible to a lot of people. We have over 8 million unique annual visitors and over 120,000 social media followers on GuideStar. So many people come to GuideStar directly and look at your profile in addition to checking out your website, of course. What you might not know is that the information that you provide on GuideStar travels far. It goes through our network of partners, over 20 donation portals, processing a high amount of giving annually, all of the major donor advised funds, and hundreds of other websites and platforms that enable fundraising. If you're curious about who some of those partners might be, here is a selection. Obviously, there's a lot of big names up here that are really enabling giving these days: Facebook, Amazon, Smile, amongst many others. So when you update your profile on GuideStar, that means that your information is current with all of these different partners. And for all of you who have said that you have too much to do and too little time, this is one of the ways to save a little time, right? To go into one portal, guidestar.org, to update your profile and know that your address, your current name, your mission statement is really up to date throughout this network of partners that are helping you in your fundraising. So it's very important to do. I just, we throw a lot of, bees with billions at you. I have one in my part of the presentation. This is just only the national advised funds, donor advised funds alone. They're responsible for facilitating over $7 billion in giving annually. So there is a lot of money flowing through these partners. I also wanted to share this interesting piece of data. So this is from Giving USA, and it's their infographic. There's a lot of information on there, but what I want you to pay attention to is this green circle. Giving by individuals accounts for 72% of giving to nonprofit organizations. 72% is giving by individuals through platforms like Amazon, like Facebook, like the donor advised funds. And then the others obviously are foundations, bequest giving, and corporations. But this trend is only continuing. Sort of more and more giving is done by individuals. So let's talk a little bit about Rocky. I thought this is the 6th giving season. There are 6 Rocky movies, and Rocky is a tale of an underdog, being motivated, working really hard, getting ready, getting prepared. So I thought it really fit the theme of this webinar: getting ready, getting prepared. I will just note that Rocky didn't even win in the first movie. It was only in the 2nd movie that he got his championship. So I feel like there's, that preparation, it takes a lot, but it might take a little bit of time to get to that victory, but it's worth it. So let's talk a little bit about what you can do. So first of all, if you're confused about whether your profile is in shape, I would urge you to go on GuideStar.org and take a look. And if you see something like this graphic that says better data starts here, what it means is that we have some of the publicly available information about your organization, but you yourself have not claimed your profile and have not provided that additional information that really kind of changes hearts and minds, right? Maybe your financials are on there, maybe a listing is on there for you, but nothing about your mission, nothing about your programs, not much about your people is on there if you have not actually claimed your GuideStar profile and added that information. So none of us want to be known by our tax forms. I don't want that to happen to you either. So please check out your GuideStar profile and see if it's even been claimed. That's kind of our word for knowing, for having an organization come in and being able to add information. So let's talk a little bit about if you've claimed, if you know you have access to your profile and you can add to it, I would urge you to think about getting to bronze, silver, gold, or a platinum seal of transparency. So this is that these levels let you know the kind of information that you provided and recognize you for sharing that information. So first of all, if you provide required fields in the bronze section recognized by a bronze seal of transparency, it means that you can be found. Your basic info is up to date. Your name, your basic program information, your address, the address that someone could make a donation to. In order to get the silver seal, you need to provide your latest financials, an audited financial statement, or if you're not large enough to have an audited statement, you can provide just some of the basic numbers from the past year, and you get recognized with a silver seal. Your gold is all about you beginning to really tell your story in your own words. So there are 5 questions in gold that basically ask you to describe your goals and your strategy, what you're trying to achieve, and how you know you'll get there. And then finally, platinum is our newest level and seal of transparency, and it recognizes organizations for sharing the quantitative metrics they use to track their progress and results. So a lot of those kind of key statistics or numbers that Barrett encouraged us to be concrete about, many of them come as a result of being able to track your indicators, track your progress and results, and translate those into a donation amount. It's really foundational to have those indicators so that you can do that translation. So let's talk a little bit about why getting a seal matters, and I'll start with a story myself. So there's an organization called Our Children, and Our Children helps women who have been in jail or who are in jail and their children connect with the support that they need. And I love the name Our Children. I'm a mother myself. I have 2 kids. I know that an hour with my children is precious. How much more precious is it when you're in jail and that might be the only hour you have with them for a while? So Our Children does important work in the community, and they have a profile on GuideStar recognized with a platinum seal. And I just excerpted, they provide some really tangible information about the work that they do. So these are some of their platinum metrics. They talk about the fact that, 100% of the students that they serve through their program stay in school, that 99% of them advance to the next grade level in school, that they serve 199, that they've placed 199 women and children in supportive housing, and that the women who are in their program do not return to jail the next year. We spoke with Rob, the head of fundraising and development at Our Children, about participating in Platinum, and this is what he had to say. That it was really easy to use. So we provide a common results catalog that a nonprofit can look through and scan for metrics that might apply to your organization. And if you're new to this work, you might be inspired by some of the metrics that you see in there. And then, but it doesn't constrain you to only those metrics. If you don't find something that you need in there, you can always enter a custom metric that reflects your work. And the best part of the story is that that metric will then feed back and go into the catalog the next year, so that this is a growing resource for the field. So you're participating in something that will help your organization and other organizations understand what are those key indicators of progress and results in the sector. So our children's profile was noticed by The Atlantic. And The Atlantic has an award, and they noticed their profile on GuideStar, and they noticed the platinum level of information. As a result of that, Rob has told us that being at platinum helped our children win from over 500 other organizations, win a $20,000 award for their work. And I think, obviously, I love this line, I work at GuideStar, you know, people take what GuideStar does seriously. The best part of the story is we didn't reach out to The Atlantic and say, please use our data, right? We made it available by providing platinum, and they looked at it and they were able to use it in their decision-making process. So there are many ways that the information that you provide on GuideStar could be helpful to you. And if you have any stories of GuideStar helping you fundraise, we'd love to hear them, obviously. If you have any stories of difficulties with GuideStar, we want to know that too, just to be clear. We're always trying to work and improve. So there are many benefits to having a GuideStar profile. First of all, you can build a trusted identity online, and it is free. So of course you want to have your website. If you have the ability to invest in that, that's wonderful. But people, when they come to your website, they know that information is, you know, presented by you, and they're sometimes looking for other resources and other places where they can look at your organization relative to other nonprofits, and GuideStar is one of the main ones where they do that. Of course, we help you grow your visibility by doing the plumbing, connecting that information on your GuideStar profile to many other giving experiences. And as I've mentioned, over 200 at this point partners who use this information. We do hope to save you some time. We hope that by updating with us first, you know, you can focus on some of those customization elements that Barrett raised are so important, right? Take these key ingredients, recombine them, and customize them in order to conduct a great giving season campaign. We obviously do believe that nonprofits have a commitment to transparency, being funded by public dollars, public tax breaks, and we believe that's important and recognize that with our seal. And donors these days, because so much giving is mediated online, really look for transparency as a hallmark of an organization. And through Platinum especially, we hope that you actually help yourselves and help the field grow in the sophistication of understanding our progress and results, and make the case for the strong support that we need from individuals, from foundations, from governments, and many others. And we believe that this is a critical juncture for the sector to transition from storytelling, obviously with personal messages, but having, you know, no data without stories and no stories without data. And Platinum really helps to showcase some of that data piece. So in the same way that you might think about updating your personal profile on LinkedIn, it's important to update your GuideStar profile as well in order to kind of have those key ingredients in hand to conduct a great giving season campaign. By the end, I do hope that even though giving season might be hard work, that we help to make it just a little bit easier by gathering this information in key place and passing it on so that you can be victorious. You might feel like Rocky here, a little beaten up, a little tired, but hopefully victorious in your campaign and connecting with your donors. And I'll hand it back over to you, Gabe.
Thanks, Eva. Appreciate the insights there, and it seems like from the questions that we're getting that our audience did too. I wanted to start here with a question that someone asked during your presentation, Eva, and that is, if your organization has, and this was a question from Samara, if your organization has earned a seal of transparency on GuideStar, where would they see that?
Great question, Gabe. So when you go to GuideStar.org and you look up your organization, right in that top box section by your name, you should see a seal if you have provided the required fields for the seal. So it's very prominent right up by your name. We also, once you have earned the seal, when you are in the profile update tool, which is kind of the back-end form where you're providing the information before it shows up on the profile, you will have access to what we call an outreach toolkit, which basically help, you can get the seal and put it in your materials on your website. There's even a clickable version of the seal that people can click and take you to the profile. So there's lots of great materials to kind of share your achievement with the outreach toolkit materials. But the first thing to do is just to go on GuideStar, look by your name. If there's a seal there, you've got one. If there's not, you don't.
Great, excellent. Barrett, this question I think probably is best for you. Mona was asking if you think that Giving Tuesday has to include an incentive. And I know that you talked about, I think you said that there was an increase in the last 2 years of something like 30 to 70%, but can you just talk a little bit more about that? And for organizations that haven't included incentives in the past, could you maybe give some examples too?
Absolutely. It's a great question. I don't think that incentives have to be used by any means. I think days like Giving Tuesday give you the opportunity to get a jump start on that overall end of year giving. So I saw a couple other questions coming in about, is Giving Tuesday necessary? It's so overwhelming to have that running in conjunction with the end of year. And again, similar to offline, online, I want you to think of them as one and the same. You can just change the wrapping paper, so to speak, adjust the language, but have Giving Tuesday campaign feed right into that end of year. So the incentive, I think, can be really appealing for people who know that that day is coming, that they can give $10 and it's actually worth 20, so that dollar for dollar match comes in really handy. And I think something that can be a little daunting is, how do we go about finding a giving match for Giving Tuesday or for that last day of the year, which are probably the two most common days to have incentives like a match. And I don't want you to think that you have to go out and find a new donor. Go to your donor database and think about who is always giving toward the end of the year. Is there a $500 donor or even several $100 donors? And you can ask them if you can count on their donation and use it as a matching gift in order to inspire others to give. And it's one way of A, acknowledging those donors who are giving at that level, and B, really help them feel empowered, like their donation is doing more than just giving you that $100 or $500. It's inspiring others to get into that gift-giving mode. I think other incentives, some organizations have, I call them like tchotchkes, but keychains or stickers, or if you have a tagline, you can say, I was part of the giving squad on Giving Tuesday, so that at different giving levels, you incentivize someone to give at $5, at $10. I think something you want to make sure you're not going to ambush your end of your donors by having a huge campaign on Giving Tuesday, but like I said, I think it can be used as a springboard. And then anytime there's an incentive, at the end of the day, we are all a little bit selfish and we want something out of the gift that we're giving. It's, in the same way that if Girl Scouts were just asking for money outside the grocery store, you're not as incentivized to give as give $10 to get a box of cookies. So it's feeding into that psychology of giving, that anything you can give them in return will more so incentivize them to give either on Giving Tuesday or toward the end of the year.
Great. Yeah, thank you. That's very helpful, I think. Another question about GuideStar here from Deb, and this one is, can churches get on GuideStar? And I'm just going to go ahead and answer that one, and the answer is yes. We don't have any information on churches through the information that we get from the IRS and the publicly available information, but all you need to do is email outreach@guidestar.org, and our support team will help you get a profile set up with the appropriate documentation. So just keep that in mind. Barrett, another question that I think would be great for you. Stacy was just asking a question about the tension between sending more emails and supervisors' concerns that you may annoy your audience. Can you talk a little bit about, one, how to send emails that don't annoy your audience, and two, how to talk to your supervisors to let them trust you to send out the emails that you need to?
Oh, Stacy, you're in the shoes I was in not too long ago working at a nonprofit. I think it's an ongoing struggle. You are not alone, first and foremost. There is misery in that company. Something I think to keep in mind, it goes back to that story arc that you're telling. Make sure that each of the emails that you're sending has a purpose behind it, that you're not just sending them to clutter up an email, but you're continuing. I almost look at them as chapters of a book. So if your campaign is about impacting children, perhaps through education, introducing that whole notion of the campaign as your first email, and then through a series of several other emails, maybe one per week, introducing several of the children, giving a quote from them and how they're personally impacted, and they will be impacted in a sustainable way. Maybe pull in an educator who is actually delivering that education that those donors are supporting. Perhaps talk to a community member or a staff member and pull them all in so that you're getting all of these different viewpoints that are supporting that core message. With regards to how do you not annoy people on an email list, I wish I had that answer. I think I'd be a rich lady. But I think at the end of the day, think about your own inbox. We all have far more emails than we actually want to read on any given day. We all have the power to delete those that we don't want to open. And you're probably triaging it by looking at those subject lines. Very seldom, even with the obnoxious salesy emails I get, do I actually unsubscribe from something. The people who are unsubscribing from your list, chances are, and I'm going to say this with full confidence, is that they are not actual donors in the first place. So I really don't want you to focus in on that and try and put forth that argument that the people who are, and you can even go back to your data and see, oh, Tori unsubscribed. Actually, Tori has never been a donor, never been a volunteer. Who knows, they signed up for a blog or for a newsletter. I think that you'll see very little correlation between those who unsubscribe and those who are active participants in your community. And I think you can always strike a balance. If your board or your superiors, supervisors are saying, nope, you get 2 emails that you get to send throughout the month of December, try and up their ante. I think it's a little bit of a negotiation. And if at the end of the day you are limited to a very small number of emails, use them strategically. Remember about that story arc. Introduce your campaign. Make sure you tell sort of that plot line in the middle of it, and then tap into that sense of urgency. So if you can only send a handful of emails, really focus on being a part of the conversation early on, not letting people forget about who you are throughout that month of December, and then remembering that sense of urgency in the last day or two of the year, which is when most of those donations are going to be processed.
Excellent, thanks. Eva, I've got a bunch of little questions for you about GuideStar nonprofit profiles that I'm just going to rattle off here, and hopefully you can give us some quick answers. Someone was asking if there's a cost involved in getting higher seal levels.
So there is not. Getting a seal is free. What the seal recognizes is sharing different levels of information, as I reviewed on the webinar. The foundational for bronze, financial silver, the kind of strategic description for gold, and then the metrics are recognized with platinum. It's absolutely free to participate. Obviously, we recognize that you're spending your time providing this information. There is a cost to that. Your time is precious and your time is money for your organization. But in terms of GuideStar, no, we do not charge for the seals.
And Eva, we actually have another question here that's asking about that time component. Can you just give an estimate of how long it typically takes for organizations to earn the different seal levels?
Sure, and I'll actually start just one step back. So first of all, in order to provide the additional information on GuideStar, you need to claim that a profile needs to be claimed by someone who represents the organization. And this is critical, and it's different than LinkedIn, right? When you put your LinkedIn profile online, you're the person putting it on there, and it's your information. When you go on GuideStar and you're providing information, you're providing it on behalf of your organization. So there is a claiming process where we basically validate, are you a person, not a robot? There's many robots online these days, so we do that kind of validation first, verifying your email. And then secondarily, we ask you for a few key pieces of information to know that you can represent your organization. The easiest way to claim is if your email address that you use to register on GuideStar is your work email address, that's the easiest way to get through this process. If it's a Gmail or a Yahoo, we can certainly accommodate you, but it means that we do need a few other pieces of information to do that verification. So that's kind of step number one. Then step number two, in terms of updating, I would say that the bronze, it's really information that anyone pretty much has on hand, right? It's the name of your CEO, it's the name of your board chair, it's your address, it's your fundraising contact, it might be your logo if you have one. So those, it takes 10 minutes or less to update the required fields in bronze. Silver depends on whether you have an audited financial statement, in which case it's a quick upload of that information, or whether you need to enter, I think, about 6 numbers into silver. If you're not the financial person at your org, it might take you a moment to actually get those, right, from your latest annual report. And so that entering the information is very quick. Getting your hands on it depends on whether you have access to those financials readily. Gold, I would say, it takes a little more time because it's a narrative section. I would advise people not to reinvent the wheel. I echo Barrett's statement, don't reinvent the wheel here. If you have a website and if you have an annual report, you're ready to do gold, right? You can take some of the best of text from those resources and put them in answer to the gold questions. And then finally, in platinum, the metrics piece, it depends on how sophisticated you are in tracking your metrics, what's available to you. For some organizations, frankly, this is easy because they really track 1 or 2 metrics consistently, and those are the ones they can very quickly report on. At GuideStar, we did a little bit of a cross-team process. Which ones were we going to show? Which ones rose to this level of importance? So it took us a little bit of offline discussion time before we were ready to enter that information. But in terms of actually uploading the information, again, maybe 15 minutes, depending on whether you're kind of ready to go with that or less. Many folks use Platinum as a tool to first learn what metrics they should be or could be tracking. So that's something that we've seen as well.
Great, thanks, Eva. And I feel like we've got time for about one more question before we wrap up. So, Barrett, let's make this like a rapid-fire answer. And I think it's fitting for this last question of, Sabrina's asking for the best thing that an organization with little to no history of giving season can do for the first time that they're participating. So what's a quick, easy thing that an organization can do if they've never participated in giving season before?
The pressure is on. I think everyone has to start somewhere. So first, remember that and don't be daunted. Don't look at this as a daunting task. I think email is the main driver of donations. If you don't have email addresses, hopefully you have snail mail addresses. So you need to be able to reach out, connect with, engage, and involve your supporters in a meaningful way. So whatever that means for you, in order to get that message out, it comes back to storytelling, connecting that impact to the donations, helping people understand how their gift is really going to help you and have a strong impact. And then you're going to start working from your historical data from there, and you'll be all set for next year when you start looking back on this year's data.
Great. Yeah, I think that's a great place to end on today. We had lots of specific questions coming in. There were some great questions coming in about switching to Classy software and about updating nonprofit profiles on GuideStar. We're going to follow up with an email that will hopefully address a lot of those questions. And if you had a specific question, then we'll be in touch with you individually to answer that as well. But here's two good places to start. You can either go to classy.org or you can go to guidestar.org/update. And if you're one of those people that had a particular question about updating your profile on GuideStar 2, you can always reach out to that outreach@guidestar.org. With that, I just want to thank both of our presenters today. Barrett, Eva, thank you very much. To the audience out there, thanks for participating as well. And good luck to everybody during this year's giving season. Thanks and have a great afternoon.